When Akira Kurosawa made Rashomon in 1950, he was a 40-year-old director working near the beginning of a career that would last 50 years, produce some of the greatest films ever made, and exert a tremendous and lasting influence on filmmaking throughout the world. Rashomon emerged from the journeyman period in his career after he had temporarily left Toho, the studio where he'd begun and where he would ultimately make most of his films. During these years, 1949 to 1951, he made movies for Shochiku, Shintoho, and Daiei. Daiei was somewhat reluctant to fund Rashomon, finding the project to be too unconventional and fearing that it would be difficult for audiences to understand. These fears proved to be groundless. The picture was one of Daiei's best moneymakers in 1950. But the film is unconventional, even radical in design, and these attributes only helped to skyrocket it to international fame at a time when art cinema was emerging as a powerful force on the film circuit. With great reluctance, Daiei permitted the film to be submitted overseas film competition. Winning first prize at the prestigious Venice Film Festival in 1951, Rashomon announced Kurosawa's talents and the treasures of Japanese cinema to the world at large. The rest, as they say, is history. The Rashomon Effect by Stephen Prince. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first episode in a new series here on the channel that I'm doing, in which I'm basically going to be going through my entire film collection, not just these two shelves right here, but also several drawers down there, and reviewing every single piece of my physical media, Blu-ray, DVD, 4K, whatever collection. Part of the reason I'm doing this is because I've actually got a lot of stuff on my shelf that I haven't watched yet, because I went through a very naive stage of just blind buying things that looked cool instead of watching stuff first. I try to do that now. I try not to blind buy too much stuff, but other than the few things I've blind bought and a couple seasons of Doctor Who and all of the live-action Transformers movies, everything in my collection is stuff that I like. So it's giving me a chance to both A, go through some of the stuff I've bought and never seen, and talk about stuff that I love. So on the whole, the majority of the time, I'm going to be talking about stuff that I really like. Which is a huge bonus for me, because I really wouldn't want to do this if I was going to have to watch through a lot of slog that I didn't enjoy, but it's stuff that I, on the whole, do tend to like, so it's going to be really cool, really exciting. My one rule for this series is that I have to actually own it. I can't just watch something on Netflix or Disney Plus or Max or whatever you want to throw at me and review it. I have to be able to turn around and pull it off the shelf or go down into one of these drawers beside me and pull it out of there. Have to physically own the piece of media that I want to discuss instead of just, watching something on a streaming service or on YouTube or whatever and discussing it. So this is going to be strictly reviewing things that are in my physical collection behind me. Again, just as a way to finally get around and watch some of the stuff that I bought and never seen, or just talk about stuff that I personally really love. And to kick off this series, I am starting off with Rashomon by director Akira Kurosawa. So, without further ado, grab your cup of white grape juice or your personal beverage of choice and join me as I begin talking about every movie in my film collection. Let's go. And as much as you can, ignore my cat in the background if you happen to be able to hear him. I had to put him in the other room because he keeps messing with cords and stuff, but if he's meowing, just ignore it. Thank you. So to start off, just to give a quick synopsis of what the film is about, Rashomon follows the story of a woodcutter in Japan who stumbles across the body of a dead man in the woods and reports it to the police. Later on, he is called in for his testimony, and it basically follows the testimony of not just the woodcutter, but also the bandit who supposedly killed the man, the man's wife who was raped by the bandit, and the man's ghost who is summoned by a medium, and it's the account of all three individuals over what happened in the murder, in the event, and basically how it all plays out. It's very non-linear in how it tells its story. You get the testimony of the woodcutter first, then the bandit, then the woman, and then finally the man's testimony. And spoiler alert, we'll get into spoilers later, but then it circles back around to the woodcutter's testimony at the end of the film. And it's basically just about contradicting narratives, unreliable narrator type thing. Every story is a little bit different in how it portrays the event, and it's really left up to you, the viewer, to decide which one you think actually happened, if any of them played out the way that each person says. And we'll get into the nitty gritty here in a second. It's very interesting just how it portrays each event and how each plays out based on who's telling the story. So that's what Rashomon is about. One thing that you have to talk about when discussing Rashomon is the cultural impact that this movie had. Of course, Akira Kurosawa, if you're at all familiar with film history, is one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, one of the greatest directors. This is actually my first Kurosawa film, and so far the only one I've watched. I'm really looking forward to watching more of his films because, spoiler alert, I guess, I'm really positive on this movie. I liked it quite a bit, so I can't wait to watch more of his work. But it is definitely a very important movie. I'll get more into my own physical copy of the film a little bit later on. One thing that I want to do with these is review my own physical copy, not just the film itself, but the physical release that I own. But I do own the Criterion release of the movie, as you might have seen a little bit ago. And of course, that means that it comes with an essay about the film. And this is actually pretty hefty. I'll talk a little bit more about it when we get into it, but this is a pretty thick little booklet. But essentially, it's got an essay talking about the cultural impact of the film. And one interesting detail I found when I was reading it is that this movie has actually become part of modern language in law, in the study of law, and like attorneys will use the term the Rashomon effect to describe what happens when witnesses come up with contradictory testimonies, which I thought was really interesting. It's just something that has become part of modern language. Another interesting behind the scenes fact I learned from reading from this is that during the making of this film, Kurosawa was working with Daiei, a company in Japan, film studio, who had become most famous for their Gamera franchise, if you're like me and a big kaiju fan. But Kurosawa was working for Daiei, and they actually didn't have much faith in the film. They didn't think that foreign audiences, in particular American audiences, would be able to follow the story due to its contradictory and non-linear form of storytelling, which I'll get into in a second. But he made it anyway, and Daiei did not give it a solid release. It wasn't until it was eventually picked by just someone working for an Italian film festival to be shown at that festival that it got much recognition, and it became a huge hit worldwide. It became very popular very quickly amongst those same foreign audiences that Daiei didn't think the movie would work for. It even won an American Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Movie of 1950. And this was part of the reason that Kurosawa's career skyrocketed with foreign markets, is because of the popularity of this film. And another way that this film impacted cinema at large is through its nonlinear storytelling, something that was unheard of and new at the time, but would become very popular and very well received after the release of this film. One very mainstream example of this is Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins, which uses this to tell the origin story of Batman alongside the modern day account. The way that this movie does it is it interweaves three narratives. Basically, the woodcutter telling a commoner about all that has happened, and then through the woodcutter's account, the three different accounts of the actual crime happening. So, with the cultural impact of this movie discussed, let's talk about the characters of this film. Now, characters are my favorite part of any movie. I'm a character guy when it comes to films, television, books, whatever you want to throw at me. I'm always looking for characters, deep, interesting characters. And this movie doesn't entirely have this. It is definitely a 1950s morality piece discussing themes of morality and ethics more so than telling a story about very deep and interesting characters, with one exception that I'll get into in a second. This film really only has 6 characters, technically 7 actors, but one of them isn't actually playing a real character in the movie. She's just playing the medium that summons the dead husband's spirit back so he can give his account. In that scene, even the actor who plays the husband is doing the voiceover to give his account. It's really just the actress for the medium doing the physical stuff, and that's it. For a movie with only 6 characters, who are the 6 characters involved in the story? You've got the woodcutter, who basically plays the role of the protagonist in the film. You've got the priest, who is there with the woodcutter when the woodcutter is telling his story to the third character, the commoner. Then you've got the bandit, whose name I forgot. Let me check real quick. I couldn't immediately find the name of the bandit, but I'll have his name right there. It should be noted he's the only character in the movie with an actual name. Everyone else is just the woodcutter, the wife, the husband, the priest, so on and so forth. He's the only character with an actual name. So your 6 characters are the woodcutter, the bandit, the priest, the commoner, the wife, and the husband. And again, none of them are super overly deep characters. They're there to play the role of the specific moral position that the movie is trying to discuss and explore. It is very much a piece about exploring the particular moral theme and ideas as opposed to exploring specific characters, which initially would be a turnoff to me, but I think it's handled really well here to where I can enjoy it nonetheless. The big exception to this is the woodcutter, who is definitely a little bit more of an interesting character in that he's not necessarily all that you would expect. On a first viewing, you'd be caught off guard by the spoiler alert twist reveal at the end that his initial account of everything that happened was also a lie. You are led throughout the movie to believe that he is, in fact, the one reliable narrator through the whole thing, when in reality you get to the end and it is just as much of a lie as everyone else. You get his real account and find out that he also stole from the scene of the crime for his own personal gain. The whole film being about how people are just selfish and will do anything for their own personal good and benefit, while you're led to believe that the woodcutter is the one exception to this. You get to the end and you find out that he is just as much of a part of it as everyone else. I'll get to the ending in a second because it is one of the more, I don't like to say controversial parts of the film, but one part of the film that is more up for conversation and up for debate than much of the rest of the movie, but we'll get to that in a moment. But the woodcutter then throws a wrench in this whole idea that everyone is just selfish and mean-spirited when at the end of the movie, when an abandoned baby gets brought into everything, he is the one that decides to take it and raise it with his family and shows that while you're working for your own benefit, you still have room to do good. At least that's how I interpret it. I guess I'm talking about the end of the movie now, so let's just get into it. The movie definitely has a very pessimistic feel going all throughout it. Like I said, it is about the selfishness of humanity and the ways in which we're just trying to better our own selves and work for our own benefit and not really look out for anyone else. And if you think that I'm smart for figuring this out, it's spelled out for you in the movie itself. They say all these things. It's very much a 1950s movie in that sense, very similar to Godzilla just spelling out the anti-nuclear theme at the end. But this movie is also like 70 years old at this point, and everyone who's ever talked about this movie will have already said the same things that I'm saying. I'm not saying anything new or reading anything new into this movie. What makes the ending controversial is the fact that the movie is very pessimistic throughout, but then adds on this little bit at the end almost as if it's backing off of it. And apparently, based on this essay, it sounds like that's kind of what happened with Kurosawa. He didn't want to make a movie that was so pessimistic. It was bothering even him how bleak the film ended up being. So he wanted to add in this little bit of hope at the end that maybe humanity isn't as bad as he says. And I know for some people that could be a point against this movie, that it would kind of back off on its theme at the last second because it's just so dark that people wouldn't accept it. Maybe it's because I'm naturally more of an optimistic person, but personally, that ending doesn't bother me too much. I definitely prefer the little bit more of an optimistic take at the end. And I think it makes the woodcutter that much more interesting of a character. Moving away from the characters of this film for a moment, I want to discuss just the cinematography and the filmmaking of this movie. It is an absolutely beautiful film. It is shot in black and white. It's 1950, but it is still so beautiful. And just watch it and you'll understand. There are really only 3 sets in this film. You have the Rashomon gate, where the film takes place, in the present day, and where the title of the movie comes from. You also have the courtyard, where all 3 characters are given their testimony, and you also have the forest in which the actual story takes place. These are really the only 3 settings in the film, but it makes it feel so much grander because the actual story in of itself is so much bigger than just these 3 locations. It's very beautifully shot, and if you watch it, you'll notice so many very well shot and well, I don't know what the right word, cinematographed, I don't know what the right word is. Yeah, very well put together and composed shots. The music is also very well done. I especially really like the ending bit as the woodcutter is walking away with the baby. I think the music in that scene is very well done and fits the theme of the film very well. All right, and now we get to the part where I discuss my physical copy of the film. As I mentioned earlier, I have the Criterion edition of this movie, and of course, that means you get very beautiful artwork on the front. Look at that. That is the bandit in the film. Turn to the back. Got your synopsis, your special features, and there are a lot of special features. I listened to the commentary right there in preparation for this, and it was very interesting. I started watching that interview, but I didn't get a chance to, and I haven't watched any of these yet, but it is a very cool amount of special features nonetheless. Opening it up, you got the booklet that I was holding throughout the whole review, the disc. Okay, it's not turning, but hold on. There we go. The disc. And here you've got the chapters the film is broken up into. And then you got this, again, with the art of the bandit on the front. You'll open it up, and you've got a good bit of different stuff in here. You've got the cast and the credits. You've got the essay for the film itself. Then you've got an excerpt, a chapter from Kurosawa's own autobiography, where he discusses this movie, chapter on this film, which I didn't read, but I really want to. And then 2 short stories that this movie was based off of. First is the titular Rashomon, but also In a Grove. So yeah, it's really cool. I really enjoy these booklets that go a little bit above and beyond with the special features, special material. But yeah, really cool. Really like this. Definitely a very cool set. And yeah, that's why I enjoy, I'm trying to get it without glare. So I enjoy Criterion stuff. So yeah, Rashomon. And if you're curious, it is spy number 138. So very early on in Criterion's collection. And now for my final thoughts on the film. I really enjoyed this movie. I thought that it was a really good psychological film, leaving you guessing as to who's telling the truth, are any of them telling the truth, how much truth is there in each particular story versus how much of it is made up for their own selfish gain. I thought all of that stuff worked really well. It definitely leaves you thinking as well, which is something I like with movies, about kind of the morality of the story. What is the film saying about people as a whole, or it's saying about the human condition, that sort of stuff. I really liked it. Yeah, I definitely really like Rashomon. It's not one of my like top 10 favorite movies or whatever, but it is a very good watch, very important if you want to watch something that left a big mark on film history. And it definitely made me want to go watch more Akira Kurosawa films. So yeah, definitely really liked Rashomon. And there we go, the first review in my series of going through every film in my physical collection and discussing it. I hope you guys enjoyed. I don't do ratings. I don't like that too much. I just want to talk about the movie and let you listen to what I talk about. Hope you all enjoyed. I don't know exactly what I'll be talking about next time I do this. I don't know if this is going to be a weekly thing or a bi-weekly or whatever. I don't know. But regardless, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll be here next time when I review something else off this shelf. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.